Finally, we're just in mid-conversation. So apparently, we're not really sure what we're doing with Alistair Black, but you're just happy that he's kicking the crap out of people.
Yes, that's what he should be doing because he's that good. I don't know why he beats the crap out of Buddy Murphy
Eddie
every
Murphy?
week. And I mean, he beat him so bad he made him drop his first name. So he's not he beat the first name off of him.
I
It's
don't
not
know why
Murphy.
I didn't think of that now and why that's funny all of a sudden. That's damn funny.
I don't know why Vince hates first names so badly. I really don't. Let's just make everybody a one name character. Let's make everyone Sade or Pele or Cher or Liberace.
No, let's not make him Liberace.
But it's like, okay, how many one name people do we need? I mean, what's wrong with Buddy Murphy anyway? But I mean, it uh Buddy Murphy gets beaten every week in an expertly booked feud or program with Alistair Black by Paul Heyman, of course, because Vince washed his hands on both of them. He gets both guys over, even in defeat. But Buddy Murphy gets rewarded with a belt and the main event spot on every Raw since he's lost. Since his last match at Alistair Black, Buddy Murphy has main evented every single Raw,
Yeah.
while Alistair Black is in the first or second hour.
I so maybe they're just waiting another year for him since they went with the Drew McIntyre thing because, and I know this gets pushed a lot because a lot of people do want. I want it now. Like the other day, I saw somebody say, "Well, they're tired of Becky Lynch already. I'm over it." And it's like, okay, but it's only been like a year and a half. Why don't you pull that back a little bit? I guess it's old me is still used to things lasting 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm scratching my back live on stream. My back itches. Hi, Polygon Princess is here again. Rev is
Hey,
here.
hey. What up, PP?
Yay! Um, so I guess maybe because they're going with the Drew McIntyre thing, Alistair Black seemed like the one guy that would be like, okay, he's here, he's going to the top. So now
Mm.
that somebody else is doing that spot, maybe they're waiting for a second. I I don't hate it, but at the same time, I'm like, why is he? I I there's not many people I'd rather have there being shoved down my throat, air quotes, than Aleister Black would be one of them. Pun
Mm.
intended. I'm okay
Mm.
with that. I don't know. The Charlotte, it's, but I also say, the Charlotte thing's not bothering me. The Becky Lynch thing's not bothering me. The Aleister Black thing is just peculiar to me. Uh,
Yeah.
um, the name thing, though, that doesn't bother me so much. It's been 50 years. People have lost first names, middle names. That's not
Mm.
such a big loss to me. Shorty G is the one where that bothers me. That's a stupid name.
Yeah, and I don't get. I mean, obviously, Chad Gable is not the same Chad Gable without his tag team partner. Um, that's what made them, and what made them such a great team. Whose name escapes me. Kurt Angle's son, cough.
Jason Jordan.
Yes, Jordan Gable were best. That was Chad Gable's best shot at being something. But I get it. Ben doesn't like short guys, and
I'm offended.
probably thought it was funny. He's not that good a promo, so let's give him a funny name.
Speaking of the ladies, apparently Shayna Baszler is Count Baszler. She's a vampire.
Yes,
Um, I didn't.
I get. Yeah, that's a first for me. I do the wrestling story mostly because I'm, significantly older than you, Dan. I've seen pretty much everything there is to see in professional wrestling, even stuff I wish I never saw that I can't unsee. But that's a first.
Yeah.
Spitting out the mouthpiece, it's like, okay, she's going to do something. There's a reason why, the camera was so focused on her spitting out the mouthpiece. That means she's just going to, you know, she doesn't care about her teeth getting knocked out. She wants to have a bare knuckle fight. No, she unzips most of Becky's onesie and proceeds to bite the back of her neck with expert use of blood capsules that it doesn't get used enough. I said
That's true.
in the AEW last week when Darby All In got
I love how you
his
say his name, man.
skateboard shoved in his throat. That would have been a great spot for a blood capsule. Getting the old school Ricky Morton, getting the when Jim Cornette put the racket across his throat and Bobby Eaton came off the top rope. It Ricky Morton bit down on a blood capsule or a condom full of blood in some cases, and it looked like, oh my God, Ricky Morton's choking to death on his own blood. And here, flash forward to 2020, Shayna Baszler. It's got a mouthful of blood, looking like a extra from True Blood or The Walking Dead. And but Becky, trooper that she is, came right back in an ambulance. And yeah, I don't. Again, that's a new one. I like them forwarding the feud. I like Shayna getting involved. I like Rhea Ripley, um, putting herself on par with the
Yes.
SmackDown and Raw Women's Champions.
Very good, yes.
So yes, the women, their title situation is a lot more compelling than the men's.
Oh God, I don't. Well, okay. This is where you're gonna get mad at me.
Never.
Well, that's not true. You've been mad at me before.
Mm-mm.
Actually, you know what? I think you're the only person that's never been mad at me because you're like, I don't care. I'll just do something else. Uh, the I care more. I love Shayna Baszler.
As
I
do
love
I.
Becky Lynch. And I'm not, and this is not a, I didn't, I'm mad about her biting her neck and blood come. I don't care. It's been, it was 30 seconds. I don't know where they're going with it, so I'll reserve the judgment. And if you listen to the past episodes, I'm kind of patient with that kind of stuff. So we'll see where that goes. She's on TV, she's on Raw. I'm happy with that for now. Start there. We'll work our way forward later.
Yeah.
I am more ready for Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair than I have been ready for a match in a long time. I am
Wow. Yeah.
so much looking forward to this. I don't. We've been this a year later. We're still talking about the same thing. I don't know why people are tired of Charlotte already. Sure. Harry Barnett, Mark Angel versus Hornswoggle needs to happen. Mark Angel versus Hornswoggle does need to happen.
Yes.
Hornswoggle versus Josh Fuller. If you can find that match from Nova Pro last year, I've put Josh Fuller. I haven't lost my train of thought. I'll be right back to it.
Yeah.
Josh Fuller. We've interviewed him on the show. Well, I've interviewed him on the show. Hopefully he comes back soon because he had a serious head injury. Harry, I'm not being sarcastic about this. You know too well in the last year about concussion and head trauma. He had the same problem in the ring. He explained how it happened on the show, and it was kind of a botch from a crappy person or a crappy situation from a person that isn't known to be crappy who did a crappy thing, and he's been out for a long time. Josh Fuller is one of the best wrestlers you've never heard of, and him and Hornswoggle had an amazing match last year that I witnessed at the Hawks Brewery it's near Dulles. I don't know what town it's in.
Yeah.
It's over
Near
there.
the airport. Okay.
It's there.
Over there.
That way.
Yeah.
Um, Mark nearly ran Hornswoggle over in 2015. Would perfect to see him get the win. I want to see Hornswoggle versus Little Mark. Mark Mathers. That's what I want to see. So anyway, I a year later, I don't know why where people are tired of Charlotte. I don't get it. I don't know what more Charlotte needs to do to prove herself that it isn't just a Flair thing. Oh, she's only famous because of her father. Oh, she's only famous because she's blonde. You're out of your mind. Subjectivity. You don't like a wrestler. I completely understand that. You can like or hate whoever you want. To say these things about somebody that talented boggles my mind. I, again, just had to preface that because I wanted to say I cannot tell you how excited I am for Rhea Ripley and Charlotte. And I'm going to give you one more after your response.
No, even if her last name wasn't Flair, she's still that good, and she's just distanced herself from the rest of the pack because she is that good. The athleticism, the promo. If I just found out just now that she was Ric Flair's daughter, I would, I wouldn't be in less awe of her because she did all that on her own. Let's not forget, everyone wants to throw out the last name. It's like, she also had a brother, David Flair, that had just as
Oh,
many advantages and didn't
more
couldn't
so,
do
quicker.
anything. So, before people keep saying she's only got it because her last name, no, she only got this far because of how good she is in the ring, on the mic, uh, just her facial expressions alone. She learned from, even if she was never related to Ric Flair and just watched everything Ric Flair did, she learned from the best.
Yeah.
So, uh, but like you said, if you're certain wrestlers you're tired of seeing. I've heard similar things about Becky. People are tired of Becky already, and that she's not getting anywhere near the kind of pop she used to get. And what she
Nobody is
needs
though.
is, a fresh, opponent, fresh feud, which could be in the guise of Shayna Baszler.
But nobody's getting that response anymore. Have you heard the
No,
audio? To say one wrestler is not getting a response over somebody else, though, nobody's popping right now.
the
You know
only
who got a
the
pop? You know who got a
who,
pop? This will segue into my last point.
yeah,
Goldberg got a
yeah,
pop, and I know how you feel about Goldberg. And certain other older guys have been around. We'll see that happen when someone makes America great again. Oh, stop it, Harry. Nobody knows what you're referencing except for me. So
no,
very good, very good. By the way, Shayna the Vampire. I already said that. Yes, Count Baszler. Um,
hmm,
I know how you feel about Goldberg, and let me just say this,
yes,
and then I'll let you yell at me.
no, no yelling.
I am tuning in specifically for Bray Wyatt versus Goldberg. I don't know why. I want to see that match so much, but I am ready for that match. I'm really excited for that match. I probably shouldn't be,
No,
but that was it was quick. It was a quick segment. It was to the point, more so on Bray than Goldberg because Goldberg kept it short and sweet because that's the best thing we could do for Goldberg talking. But I was excited and and I'm ready for it.
uh, the only
I know.
the only match I'm looking forward to at Super Showdown, which and I'm not, is Ricochet versus Brock. Only to see how Brock handles it. They even made a point of it on Raw. How Brock has trouble with the faster guys, and but it's an opportunity to see, and the matches I've enjoyed from Brock the most have been against AJ, have been against Daniel Bryan, against Finn Balor. So I like to see what he can do with Ricochet. And plus, I just love seeing Ricochet getting a shot like that on a huge stage. Because he's another guy that kind of gets uh, short shrift. And I obviously Super Showdown is a glorified house show. It's a throwaway
Very much.
uh, show, but you know
That's all right.
that would be the only match I'm looking forward to. And last point about you said no one's getting pop anymore. The only woman getting significant, sustained um, reaction, because she's really turning into her character, to me, and it's just I'm not there live, so the live crowd might be different. But for my television watching it live, Bailey has um
Yes.
has been gotten some significant since her change, her transformation.
Surprise to no one on this show.
Hmm.
Bailey's heel turn has worked out perfectly.
Yes.
Because of where we are as wrestling on TV culture, where people are revolting against the WWE, whether it's justified or just because they want something new. I'm not judging it. I'm just saying people are either not watching it because they don't want to, or they're standing for something else, going to
Hmm.
AEW, or because the NWA is on TV. Impact is still doing their thing relatively. Ring of
Yeah.
Honor, Major League Wrestling. There's a lot of wrestling on WoW. Don't forget WoW.
Yeah.
That's starting up again. Season 3 is starting up soon.
Wow.
Wow, wow, wow. There's so much wrestling right now that I feel
Hmm.
a lot of things later on that were lost will be discovered later on. One of those things is Bailey as a heel is fantastic. And I know that a lot of it was, well, we don't want her turning heel. She's John Cena. She's John Cena. We can't have her turn heel. Working out perfect for Bailey. At least gave her fresh. Well, it gave her character fresh story, and it's working. And she pulls the heel faces fantastically, where she just looks angry or looks down upon, as Harry would say, Boule.
Yeah.
Um, And Harry did want to add about Impact that he watches for only Rosemary. Well, that's more than I can say because I watch for Rosemary and I watch for Jordan Grace and I turn the other rest of the show off because you know who was on the show and I
Yeah.
refuse to give them numbers because of it. But anyway, Bailey, yes, Bailey is getting a great reaction and I really hope there's a WrestleMania spotlight. Obviously, there will be, but I hope it's not overshadowed by the other spotlights. You know what I mean, sir?
I do what you means, sir.
I know what you mean.
Dan, if you don't mind, I'll like to take the reins from you because I want to take our folks back to a time where uh, wrestling was not called sports entertainment, where belts were not called titles, and where fans were not called the universe. It's time, once again, for the Craig Lagan Show, or as I like to call it, the Wrestling Historian.
Wonderful.
I only called it the Craig Lagan Show because in the UK we have a small but loyal following where it's called the Craig Lagan Show. Much like in China where the Green Hornet was called the Kato Show.
That's
In
right.
the UK,
That's right.
it's called the Craig Lagan Show. We're going to start off the Wrestling Historian. Now, when we last left off, we're going to start with February 6th, first of all, a very important date before we go back to last week's historian. February 6th, 1977, in Toronto, Canada, at Toronto Maple Leaf Gardens. What was then considered an upset, and I was completely shocked, when Harley Race, of all people, ended the nearly 2-year reign of Terry Funk to become the new NWA Heavyweight Champion. Because Harley Race, up until then, was the shortest reigning NWA champion of all time. Harley Race had defeated Dory Funk Jr., and a month and 2 weeks later, he lost it to Jack Briscoe. Because Jack Briscoe couldn't beat Dory Funk, and Dory Funk didn't want to drop the belt to Jack Briscoe.
Oh.
Enter Harley Race, who beat Dory Funk and lost it to Jack Briscoe. So Jack Briscoe gets to be NWA champion without ever beating Dory Funk. And Harley Race, up till that point, from 1973 until this date, 1977, was just considered a footnote. He was the shortest reigning NWA champion of all time. And not that I thought his best days were over, but him beating Terry Funk was a huge, huge upset. And this was a Harley Race that no longer was dyeing his hair blonde. He was no longer a handsome Harley Race.
Cool.
This was the dark-haired, mustache, sideburns, no knee pad Harley Race that defeated Terry Funk by submission with the Indian Deathlock. Harley Race, of course, would be his second reign, the second of his then record 7 reigns as NWA champion, and with those 7 reigns would solidify himself almost synonymous, as far as I'm concerned, with the NWA championship. When I think of the NWA title, I think of Harley Race. Not Ric Flair, not Dusty Rhodes, not even Jack Briscoe. I think of Harley Race because of the many times he held it and the people that were lucky enough to beat him, whether it be for 5 days or for a week. You beat Harley Race, you were beating someone.
Yep.
Well, Harley Race staked his claim to be synonymous with the NWA title, not for the shortest reign, but for the many reigns he had. But it started February 6, 1977. February 6, 1988. Now, my original opening, when last we left off, in last week's Wrestling Historian, meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice, last week's Wrestling Historian, we ended on February 5th, where professional wrestling returned to network television for the first time in 55 years, headlined by the heavyweight title match where Andre the Giant ended the 4-year reign of Hulk Hogan with a dirty referee and won the WWF heavyweight title from Hulk Hogan, and then surrendered the belt to the Million Dollar Man, Ted DiBiase. Well, February 6th, the very next night, and to give you an idea of how insane the schedule was even back then, February 6th, 1988, the WWF ran a matinee show in the Boston Garden in front of 15,534 fans. And that same night, they ran the same card right here in Philadelphia at the Spectrum in front of 13,112 fans. The main event, both times, in both the matinee and the evening shows, were Hulk Hogan and Bam Bam Bigelow
Wow.
going up against Andre the Giant and the new WWF heavyweight champion, Ted DiBiase. These would be the only times where Ted DiBiase would wear the belt to the ring and be introduced as the new WWF heavyweight champion. So for
Wow.
people who hadn't seen it the previous night, they were in for a shock watching not only Hulk Hogan come out without a belt, but seeing the belt on Ted DiBiase. So these would be the only times where Ted DiBiase would be introduced as the reigning WWF heavyweight champion at the Boston Garden in the afternoon, and then that night at the Spectrum um, with Andre the Giant as his tag team partner. They would lose both those bouts to Hulk Hogan and Bam Bam Bigelow, but Ted DiBiase for that time was the introduced and wore the championship belt. February 6th, 1990, Dan, in the NWA, the Clash of Champions in Texas, one of the most memorable Clash of Champions of all time, if only because of so many memorable moments that happened at this Clash of Champions 10. Uh, the Steiners would defeat Doom, forcing Doom to unmask, and as Jim Ross would call it, the worst kept secret in professional wrestling was revealed as Butch Reed and Ron Simmons took off their masks after losing as Doom. Ironically enough, after they took off their masks, they became the most dominant tag team in the NWA at the time. On that same Clash of Champions was the Mil Mascaras defeated Cactus Jack, a match that Cactus detailed in his first book as one of the worst experiences he's ever had as a professional wrestler. Of course, we might remember it as from the bump that Jack took from the apron of the ring, flat back onto the concrete floor after getting a drop kick from Mil Mascaras. Milton went over. If you find it on YouTube, look for it. But yeah, Mil Mascaras versus Cactus Jack at Clash of Champions 10, the match that Cactus Jack recalls as one of the worst uh, experiences of his professional wrestling career. And for Mick Foley to say that, it had to be something. Also, that same Clash of Champions, Dan, um, was a bad night for your favorite wrestler because
Yeah.
not only did Sting get kicked out of the Horsemen,
Yeah.
but later on that night, during Ric Flair's match, when Sting attempts to climb the cage to get in, Doug Dillinger, head of security, to um, yanked on Sting to get down off the cage, and in doing so, pulled Sting all the way down, and Sting on his landed flat and tore his ACL, MCL, and his meniscus. To kind of take the heat off of Doug, the they replayed Sting running towards the cage and saying when Sting banged his knee on the cage and climbing it, that's what did all the damage to his knee.
Yeah.
Uh, but Doug Dillinger, uh, with his actions, in his zeal to get Sting off the cage, tore up Sting's knee and would throw the WCW for the latter portion of 1990 into complete disarray. Lex Luger, who was the top heel there at the time and was doing a great job as a heel, he had already broken the Sting's most popular wrestler trophy, broke Ric Flair's Wrestler of the Year trophy, but things had to be put in place, so had to turn Lex face and have him align with Sting and have Lex Luger take on Ric Flair for the NWA title.
Doug Dillinger had a job way too long.
Oh, I agree.
He had a job for way too long, and you literally ruined months of booking and planning by doing what you did because you are a security officer, air quotes. He wasn't. You look that story up. Uh, yeah, I remember that very much. I remember the promo by Ole,
Yeah.
and just saying to Sting, "You signed your death warrant. When you signed that contract, you signed your death warrant." I mean, what a night for Steve,
Yeah.
for the Stinger.
Well,
I mean,
and
it was.
yeah,
Go ahead.
the irony is when the conducting the interview where Sting was kicked out of the Horsemen
That's right.
was Terry Funk.
It was Terry Funk.
And Ole telling Sting, we joined up with you because we need help taking care of this guy. And it pointed to Terry just standing there with the mic. And he said, so you're out of the group. You're no longer a Horseman. And Flair and Ole had been conducting the interview. But as soon as they attack Sting and Ole and Arn are holding him, Flair comes alive. Get out of the sport! Get out of our lives!
Yeah.
And like he had just been like a window dressing the whole time, letting Ole take things. But as soon as Sting was held down, Flair came alive. But yeah, with that all that happened on one Clash. So many great moments, but yeah, Clash of Champions and Sting was kicked out of the horse and loses his knee all in one fell swoop and throws WCW into chaos, into booking chaos. My other favorite Doug Dillinger, he's been there too long moment, was when Miss Jacqueline was
Oh.
with Kevin Sullivan. She was supposed to reach under the ring, grab a chair, and I believe hit Disco Inferno with it. But instead, she looked under the ring, and there was no chair because Doug Dillinger was just out of camera shot because he was tired of standing, just took out the chair and was sitting on it.
Just
So,
in the way all the time, Doug.
yeah.
Ugh.
February 7th, 1989, the dying days of the AWA, and with good reason, because it was on this date that a battle royal was held, and it was won by Larry Zbyszko. And Larry Zbyszko, by winning a battle royal, became the new AWA heavyweight champion.
Yes.
Jerry Lawler, the previous champion, the unified champion, because he was still the world class and CWA champion, could not come to an agreement with the AWA, namely Vern Gagne. He was stripped of the belt, and the battle royal was held, and Larry Zbyszko would win his first world championship. Kind of like winning the being the ship's captain of the Titanic.
Yeah. You're down with the ship, sir. Have fun.
Yeah. That same date, February 7th, 1992, Money Incorporated, Mike Rotundo and Ted DiBiase would defeat the Road Warriors for the WWF Tag Team Championship. They got a little help from the natural disasters, but in doing so, Mike Rotundo as Erwin R. Shyster, but he became the first and only man to. The Road Warriors are the only team to win all three world titles: AWA, NWA, and the WWF. But Mike Rotundo defeated the Road Warriors for two of them. As a member of the Varsity Club, he and Steve Williams defeated the Road Warriors for the NWA Tag Team title. And as part of Money Inc., he and Ted DiBiase defeated the Road Warriors
I'm a
for the
Mike Rotundo
WWF.
guy.
Yes, as am I.
Yeah,
Um, Former letterman at Syracuse and part of the NFL's punt, pass, and kick competition
that's right.
way back in the early '80s. But yes, Money Inc. Ended the Road Warriors' first, last, and only reign as WWF Tag Team Champions.
Good.
And February 7th, 2000, I included this because still it's 20 years. I can't believe it's been 20 years later.
Jesus.
And the
Oh my God.
participants involved still cite this match as one of the times where you could hear the crowd. It was so electric,
Yeah.
and there was so much heat for this match. In last week's Wrestling Historian, I talked about the debut of the Radicals from WCW: Perry Saturn, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, and Eddie Guerrero. Well, this would be the the 10-man tag team main event of that night's Raw in Reunion Arena in Dallas. And all the
Wow.
participants are sadly the ones that still um, are here with us to talk about it. Cite this as one of the most electric matches they've ever. I remember watching it on TV with uh, standing up. The 10-man tag team of Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, Triple H, and X Pac, with Eddie Guerrero in a sling at ringside, went up against a team of Cactus Jack, Rikishi, Too Cool, and The Rock.
Wow.
Yeah, then I just remember that match just being crazy and the crowd just being on their feet the whole time.
Wow.
Absolutely amazing. Uh, and at the same time, Raw was still going head to head with Monday Nitro. The main event for that Nitro was the WCW Heavyweight Champion, even though he lost to Chris Benoit, but the WCW Heavyweight Champion Sid defeating Scott Hall. And the numbers for that match, Nitro did a 2.7, and that match for the 10-man tag team on Monday Night Raw did a 6.5. Yeah,
This is, holy Jesus. Those numbers make me laugh. It just.
yeah, staggering. I mean, every wrestling every wrestling organization would kill for right now, but back then
Kill for
they
half
were
that.
back then they were laughable.
Oh, man.
Uh, February 8th, 1986, in the Boston Garden,
Wow.
Tito Santana would lose the Intercontinental Championship to Randy Savage.
Ah, yes.
And before the advent of TV, even though Tito would lose the belt February 8th, he would still defend it all the way up until February 24th when it was shown on Primetime Wrestling. But Randy Savage defeated Tito Santana, and if you look at it, Tito kind of botched the ending. Um, Randy had something in his trunks that he had to go deep down into it to get whatever it was.
No, Craig, that's his
Uh,
penis.
yeah, but
Oh.
it was but I guess it was behind his penis to grab
Oh.
it because if you look at it on YouTube, and I encourage you because Randy Savage didn't have the thickest tights either.
No, he didn't.
They were kind of speedo, so wherever that was, it was way down deep in there.
It was in there.
But he picked it up. He swung at Santana. Santana ducked and he brought him back into the ring with a belly to back suplex. While he had him up, Randy hit him and fell on top of him. And you could see while Randy was covering, Tito was trying to blade, but he did such a bad job either because of the amount of sweat he had on or because he never bladed or he didn't blade it a lot.
Yeah.
But he didn't blame himself at all, which would have sold the fact that Randy hit him with something. They never put the camera on Tito because he was never bleeding, so that kind of ruined the ending. But Randy Savage would define himself as the best wrestler in the company with that Intercontinental title win, and with Randy Savage's Intercontinental Championship, that became more or less the working man's title, and it was Randy Savage's Intercontinental Championship reign, along with the man who would beat him, Ricky Steamboat, that would have future wrestlers like Chris Jericho, like Edge, uh, and others to look at the Intercontinental title as the working man's belt, because it was after Randy Savage's reign, that the best wrestlers in the company would go on to be Intercontinental champions.
Yep.
Randy Savage, Ricky Steamboat, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Steve Austin, The Rock. Chris Jericho cited that as the title he wanted to win more than a world title, more than the NWA title. He wanted to be Intercontinental champion because of Ricky Steamboat and because of Randy Savage.
I do think that one day where it's a little bit slower with the wrestling historian, that our topic of discussion should be worst blade jobs in, in
Yeah,
wrestling history. 'Cause I think between us, we have probably 20 we could tell stories about.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Tito's is up there. Tito's in my top five.
I
But
I saw one on Botchamania today, real quick. I'll rewatch it and I'll tell you what company it was. But whoever took the bump, like they took the chair shot, and the referee in front of God and everybody just kneels on top of him and kneels on top of him in front of his head and does that. Just
really,
like the motion was a stabbing motion. Like who else? Who? How did you not catch that?
one of my favorites is an old Fritz von Erich match. Was on television to show the power of the claw. He had the guy in the claw, and the referee went to check him. And as he was checking, he was just like drawing on the guy's head, uh, just to open him up to show the power of the claw. And but didn't do a good enough job. Last footnote to this Randy Savage's Intercontinental title win. A title win that would define Randy Savage's career, put him on the map, along with his match with Ricky Steamboat when he would lose the Intercontinental title. While both of those men were the most influential Intercontinental champions of all time, both men only held it once.
Jeez, wow, that didn't even occur to me.
Yep, just to let you know.
Wow.
That same date, February 8th, 2010, to conclude Ted DiBiase Memorial Week, Ted DiBiase Tribute Week. I
Say he's not
mentioned
dead.
was the he was introduced as the world champion at the beginning of this segment, and he defeated the Road Warriors February 7th. Well, February 8th in the Ted DiBiase Historic Week, February 8th, 2010, he was announced as the first member of the 2010 class of Hall of Fame.
That's right.
Ted DiBiase. So this weekend, those 3 days in the week of in the career of Ted DiBiase are very important.
Very
So
important. February, just a random February.
Just February involved Ted DiBiase. February 9th, 1982. I highlighted this because I read about it in the After magazines, and it made me really, really, really want to have cable TV more than anything because so many great things were happening. Well, February 9th, 1982, in Tampa, Florida, the Midnight Rider defeated Ric Flair for the NWA Heavyweight Championship. The first time a masked wrestler had ever won the NWA title. Now, under the auspices, Bob Geigel, the NWA champion, the NWA president, the NWA president, he was the referee for this bout, and he counted Ric Flair's shoulders down, 1, 2, 3, and awarded the NWA championship to the Midnight Rider. The thing is, the reason why masked wrestlers had never won the championship because in order to book the NWA champion overseas in Japan or in Puerto Rico, you had to unmask or reveal your identity to the NWA president.
Ah,
And the NWA president, you can keep your mask on, but I just need to know who you are
right.
so I can book you in territories. The thing is, uh, the Midnight Rider only appeared after Dusty Rhodes lost a loser league town match to Kevin Sullivan. Uh, and then the Midnight Rider appears and he wreaks havoc on everyone. And so they have the camera backstage, as luck would have it, when Bob Geigel, the NWA president, comes to the Midnight Rider and asks him to reveal his identity. Midnight Rider says, "I can't do it." And Bob Geigel said, "Could you do it if it was 2 weeks later?" Meaning he was kind of knew who it was Dusty Rhodes. The Midnight Rider didn't answer. So because he couldn't reveal his identity, the Midnight Rider had to relinquish the NWA heavyweight title and have it returned to Ric Flair. But this went all over the after magazines. This was traded in videotapes back then, next to the Dynamite Kid uh, Tiger Mask feud, which would start in this year of 1982. The Midnight Rider win over Ric Flair was also one of the most hotly traded videotapes um, because the wrestling back then, kids, cable wasn't as huge as it was. So unless you were in Florida or in the Mid Atlantic area where Championship Wrestling for Florida was shown, you missed it. And you missed the call of Gordon Soley. You missed the backstage interview with Buddy Colt and Bob Geigel and Dusty Rhodes. But the Midnight Rider defeating Ric Flair for the NWA title February 9th, 1982 was a big deal.
Yeah, man.
February 10th was an even bigger deal. Uh, Speaking of wrestling back then and how it was and the territories, February 10th was a very sad day for a number of reasons. February 10th, 1984 was the back then was the darkest day in wrestling. Was a day that shook the world of professional wrestling. It was such a big day that it was announced on WWF television. This is 2 weeks after. We're at the very beginning of Hulkamania. Hulk Hogan was appearing on the WWF TV taping that day, and it was huge, so huge that Vince McMahon at the beginning of the show announced that David Von Erich
Oh
had
my
died
God, that's right.
at only 25 years old. This is in world class. This is in NWA, but this was such big news that Vince McMahon broke it on WWF television that David Von Erich had passed away. The same thing that was done in the AWA. The same thing was done in Mid Atlantic in Championship Wrestling from Florida when Gordon Soley broke the news. This the death of David Von Erich changed professional wrestling. Uh, Not only was he a member of one of the most prestigious families in professional wrestling, not only was he someone that the NWA thought could someday be an NWA champion, the future of David Von Erich was limitless.
Yeah.
So many things that people speculated on. What could he have done? What could he have been? Obviously, an NWA champion. Obviously, at some point, going to the WWF. People even speculated that he could have been the Undertaker
Oh
before there was an
wow.
Undertaker.
Yeah.
Because of his size and because of his athleticism. He was a legit 6'9", and he was only going to get uh, better and maybe not bigger, but maybe more muscular. He could have been part of that the big monster ripped guys. He could have been part of the NWA during its glory years. But David Von Erich's death at the age of 25 changed the course of professional wrestling. It definitely changed the course of world class
Yeah. Wow.
because later on that year, in May that the biggest crowd in professional wrestling history at that point would gather in Texas Stadium to see Kerry Von Erich wear David's trunks and pursuit of the NWA title against Ric Flair, and that would make World Class the biggest wrestling organization uh, next to the WWF at the time. But David Von Erich, and still speculation of how he died. Ric Flair mentioned in his book that it was a drug overdose. That Bruiser Brody, David was in Japan on tour. Uh, so many stories back then that he got kicked in the stomach on tour in Japan and never woke up. In truth, he never wrestled one match in Japan.
Oh,
He was the NWA United National Champion, and he was on tour of Japan. And Ric Flair wrote in his book that David died of an overdose. That Bruiser Brody was actually flushing the drugs down the toilet when the cops came to investigate. But Kevin Von Erich, Bronco Lubitsch, even Gary Hart said that it was it was a coronary enlarged heart because of he had acute enteritis and inflammation of the intestines is what caused his death, and that's what the according to them what the autopsy said is was the cause of his death. But whether or not it was that or if it was drugs, the fact remains David Von Erich at 25 was gone, and the Von Erichs, world class, the NWA, professional wrestling would never be the same.
good.
Unfortunately, that same date, February 10th, 2003, we had to say goodbye to another uh, wrestler. This one was someone who did have a long and storied career. This one, it was someone that we did get to watch him grow from uh, a second generation star to making his own niche. But on February 10th, 2003, we had to say goodbye to Kurt Hennig.
Oh my God.
Was found dead in Tampa, Florida. He was on his way to he was doing a wrestling event uh, put on by Jimmy Hart, and like so many, unfortunately, before him or after him, he was found in his hotel room, unresponsive. In Kurt's case, his cause of death was cocaine overdose.
It's a lot of cocaine, man.
Yeah,
No, I'm not gonna comment. Good.
yeah, but unlike David Von Erich, we did get to see Kurt Hennig go from a white meat babyface to the one of the best of his best performers of his generation. Jim Cornette would uh, had called Dolph Ziggler another Kurt Hennig, if only in that only because his work is impeccable. Kurt Hennig was someone that could do everything in the ring. Uh, the Mr. Perfect moniker, while he was originally meant for Terry Taylor, I don't think he could have pulled it
Oh
off the way that Kurt Hennig did.
no, that would have been a joke. That if Terry Taylor was Mister Perfect, we would still be. Every year we'd talk about terrible gimmicks. We'd talk about Terry Taylor being Mister Perfect. That would be the terrible gimmick. I have no love lost for Terry Taylor, but that would have just put me over the top.
The vignettes that Kurt Hennig did leading up to his debut as Mr. Perfect were legend. Wait for it, dairy. Um, but it was all him. The golf shots, the bowling, the basketball. You know, whether or not he can the ball to himself is a whole other thing. But they were just uh, they were classic.
Keep it kayfabe, buddy.
Yeah. But I mean, professional athletes still talk about it. To the point where Wade Boggs was the
Buddy.
one who posthumously inducted him into the Hall of Fame.
And if you have the
Uh,
DVD, he tells a story of that Kurt saved his life
did
once.
he?
Have you not seen the DVD? I
I have
just
not seen the
assumed you
DVD.
had that DVD. Oh my, yeah. So not to pop your bubble, one of the things the DVD does is show the outtakes of those vignettes.
Okay.
There were several missed shots before. Of
I'm
course.
sure.
Of course. No, I mean, it's very tongue in cheek. Like, did he make all those shots? No. It just shows him screwing it up. Um, but one of the things, I'm not going to tell the whole story because I encourage anybody to look up the story, is I don't want to say they're out hunting, but they're out hiking or hunting. And Wade Boggs gets caught in barbed wire
Oh
across
wow.
somebody's fence and starts bleeding.
Hmm.
Without Kurt Hennig there, he would have died. He would have bled on the fence and died out.
Wow.
And he tells the story and he gets very emotional about it. That's the other
Okay.
thing on that DVD. His father's in it, all over that. It
Oh
came out
right.
after he
Okay.
passed. Larry the
Hmm.
Axe Hennig is that's tough. That's tough to
Yeah.
watch. If anybody's a hardcore wrestling fan, listen to this. If you haven't, or watching this and haven't seen the Heroes of World Class DVD, if you can find it,
Hmm.
more so than the WWF one because the WWF one has the WWF spin on it.
Yeah.
And I love you, Cowboy Bill Irwin, but I don't believe a word you say when it comes to David Von Erich. But that's just my personal opinion. Um, uh, you know, when you watch through Heroes of World Class, they're all dead other than Kevin,
Yeah. Hmm.
and Kevin's very matter of fact about
Yes.
it. WWF one, not so much.
No.
But the Kurt Hennig one is still fantastic, and it was fresh. I believe it was a year or two after he had passed. Before that,
Okay.
after the when that DVD came out, and it's got his son on it. It's got
Yeah.
Larry on it, and it's got great footage, and it's one of the best. I'll pop it in every now and then, once a year, just because. Man, Hennig was so goddamn good. Everybody talks about the best being Triple H or Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart or Ric Flair or this guy, and not enough people talk about Kurt Hennig. His name was literally Mr. Perfect, and it wasn't a
Yeah.
gimmick. The guy was so good,
Yeah.
so good. I'm not gonna talk about it for another 20 minutes, but my God, he was so good.
That he was. He was another guy that I thought that where it started my disdain of the WWF because I saw you see guys like Kurt Hennig and Ted DiBiase, like back to him, that were so good, such better wrestlers and wise, and like they can't beat Hulk Hogan, really. Like I mean, you look at it now, it's like, of course those guys would have been world champion if the WWE with what they get as far as heat goes, as far as putting the belt on someone that gets that type of heat, then DiBiase and Hennig would have been champion too. I look at a guy like Randy Orton, no, and we're not dissing Randy, but Randy Orton is a what, 11-time, 10-time champion. Edge is a 12-time champion. Neither of those guys could hold Kurt Hennig's or Ted DiBiase's jock.
Maybe
Um,
Randy. Randy's closer.
Randy's closer, but
Sure.
I can look at a Kurt Hennig match over and over again. I've seen every Randy Orton match there is to see.
Sorry, I
It,
saw something on. Never mind. Okay,
yeah,
keep going.
that's okay. But February 10th was an incredible dark day in professional wrestling. We lost David Von Erich and Kurt Hennig on this day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bring us
I'm
up,
sure,
Craig.
believe me, I was trying to find something else significant that happened that day that I could even spin, but those are the only things that came out.
Great.
February February 11th, 1996, Super Brawl 6. We talked about Clash of Champions, that things happened that made it memorable. Well, Super Brawl 6 was the strap match between Kevin Sullivan and Brian Pillman that never happened because the loser had to say the words, "I respect you." And Brian Pillman said those words, but he ended it with "Booker, man."
I respect you, Booker man. The look on Kevin's face, man. Uh,
Yeah. This was the beginning of the Brian Pillman shoot angle, where we fans who were not privy to what goes on behind the scenes were led to believe that Brian Pillman was shooting, was breaking the fourth wall, was losing his mind, didn't care anymore, wanted to get fired from WCW. Um, and so he called Kevin Sullivan the Booker, who smart fans knew that's exactly who he was. Casual fans wondered what the hell's
What
going
the hell
on.
is he
Why did he
talking
call him
about?
that? Why did he walk out of the match? Arn Anderson had to came in to finish the match in his shorts and sneakers till Ric Flair came out and stopped them both from fighting and said, "Hey, let's all be friends." Later on, Ric Flair would defeat Randy Savage in a cage match for the WCW Heavyweight Title, but people were still talking about what the hell was Pillman doing? Just walked out of the match and called him, "I respect you,
I
Booker
respect you,
man,"
Booker man.
and dropped the mic and left. So, but that was the beginning of the Brian Pillman loose cannon.
Could have fooled
That
me, man.
yeah,
If people forget that that wasn't he still appeared on Nitro a few more times after that.
yeah,
And then went to ECW and had that weird run there, and then
which would
went
lead to
immediately
his
to
run in the WWF. Yeah.
exactly boom.
Had it not been for that car accident that took place in between that, we might have seen a completely different Brian Pillman
Well,
in the WWF.
yeah. There's another guy that's not talked about enough these days. I'm very happy his son is carrying on the name Flying Ryan Jr.
And not only the name, but the haircut as
The
well.
hair in the face, man. You
Yeah.
couldn't. The man couldn't walk into a room and go, "No, I'm not related to him." Be like, "Oh, okay."
He's got a match. Brian Pillman Jr. has a match coming up with Bubba Ray Dudley, and Bubba cut a really a sincere promo on Brian Pillman Jr. Not nice at all. Apparently, Bubba had met Brian Pillman's dad in
Oh no.
ECW, and he was not very nice to him.
Oh, oh no.
So,
Oh, I have to look that up. I'm sure that was
yes,
great.
yeah, I saw it on his Twitter feed, but yeah, he wasn't yelling. He just turned the microphone on and just said, "Brian, let me tell you something about
Your dad's a dick.
yeah." Because I don't know why you copied it. If you're gonna copy anything, I wouldn't have suggested his hair.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Oh man, I
but
gotta look
but
that up, man.
damn good promo. Yeah, soon as we're done, seriously, check it out. Which brings us to today in wrestling history. 1984, another thing that I had to look up because it was an urban legend at the time when it happened. And 1984 was my favorite year of professional wrestling. It was the year I graduated high school, and it was wrestling was at its zenith. Not just the beginning of Hulkamania, but the world class, the NWA, the AWA was on fire. Um, just everything, and the attendance worldwide in every federation was at the top. Well, in Mexico, in front of 20,000 fans in the UWA, the UWA heavyweight champion El Canek uh, defeated Andre the Giant in a 2 out of 3 falls match. Not only did he body slam Andre, but he pinned him to win the match. And again, no internet, no dirt sheets. I had to find this out. I thought it was an urban legend for the longest time. It wasn't corroborated till again the internet, until dirt sheets, until the Wrestling Inquirer. I found that it was true. But El Canek today, 1984, pinned Andre the Giant. Now this is 3 years before WrestleMania 3, when Andre suffered his first pinfall loss. But El Canek not only body slammed Andre, hip tossed him, but pinned Andre in front of 20,000 fans in Mexico. This is 1905. Up because I did. Uh, and Ombar defeated Brian Blair for the Florida heavyweight title. Now Brian Blair, when he comes to the WWF, job guy, one of the killer bees, but when he wrestled in Florida, the guy was unbeatable. untouchable. I was in college in Florida, and Brian Blair pinned Ric Flair in the non-title TV match. He beat Rick Rude. He was beating all these guys, and he went to a double countout draw with Bruiser Brody. Brian Pillman in Florida was like, Michael Jordan in God damn it, that movie he did with the
Space Jam.
cartoons. Yes. Just unstoppable. But it's like, why isn't I've seen that same guy at the Spectrum, go to a draw with, freaking Larry Sharp. But he pins Rick Rude? Anyway, well, he's a Florida heavyweight champion, and Jesse Barr beats him. And the way Jesse Barr beat him was very impressive, and it bugs me because it hasn't been done. Typical heel move. Jesse Barr has got brass knuckles. He knocks out Brian Pillman while the referee's down, right?
Right.
But instead of covering him, Dan, Jesse Barr takes Brian Blair's lifeless body and puts it on himself.
Oh.
And waits for the referee to come to.
Huh.
And when the referee comes to, he counts 1, 2, and then he kicks out. And then Jesse Barr comes off the top rope with a huge elbow on the lifeless body of Brian Blair and then pins him. So no one's the wiser. And it's like, why doesn't anyone do that? Not to use a foreign object, and not that instead of waiting for the referee to come to, put the guy on top of you, okay, and then kick out, and you can still get the win, and no one's the wiser. But that happened on this date, 1985. That same day, 500, 600, 700 miles to the north, in Poughkeepsie, New York, more things happen at these WWF mass TV tapings. I talked about in Wrestling Historians past about Roddy Piper making his debut at a TV taping. Well, on this particular TV taping in Poughkeepsie, New York, managing the Intercontinental Champion, Greg Valentine, and a debuting Jim Neidhart, fresh from Tennessee, making his debut in the WWF, Jimmy Hart.
Ah. Very nice. And we haven't gotten rid of him ever since.
Nope. And he's still there. Still got the sunglasses. Still got, speaking of same hair, you think Brian Pillman's hair hasn't gone out of style. Jimmy Hart.
Let me tell you something about Jimmy Hart. That man probably made more money on music publishing and music than he ever made in wrestling.
Well, if I had the same, if the Gentrys had set me up for life almost 60 years later, I would keep the same hairstyle too.
Yeah, exactly. But not even the Gentrys. I mean, yes, the Gentrys. The guy was a hit machine before he was even in wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
But then he was a hit machine, quote unquote, while he was in wrestling, because he co-wrote most of the music you heard in the 80s and almost all of the WCW stuff. So the man owns publishing and all of that. So anytime you hear Hogan's music playing, he's co-writing.
Jimmy Hart's getting something.
Yeah.
All the theme songs you heard, Jimmy Hart, if he didn't write them, he produced them.
So he's the producer and or writer on most of the themes up until the early 2000s. Maybe I'm being a little less generous, the mid 2000s. Both of Hogan's themes, Real American and the worst one, which was, what the hell is it called? I don't know. In WCW. Sting's theme.
Yeah.
Jimmy Hart's name. Go look. Jimmy Hart's name is on 90% of it.
Yeah.
So the man never works. You want to know why does he own a restaurant? I'll tell you why.
Yeah. Yeah, incredibly savvy businessman. One of the great managers of all time. Jim Cornette learned at the feet of Jimmy Hart. And the Jimmy Hart in Memphis. I really wish that the fans in the WWF fans could see it was obviously their idea to give him a megaphone,
Sure.
um, to to give him a prop because everyone in WWF needs a prop or needs a
Sure.
cartoon, needs a something. But Jimmy Hart without a megaphone was one of the most influential managers in professional wrestling history. Just not only for his mind for wrestling, his business acumen, the way he could book, the way he could get anybody. The reason why he managed so many people because so many people couldn't talk, but Jimmy Hart managed every big name heel that came in professional wrestling that came through Memphis. Not just Jerry Lawler, but the aforementioned Rick Rude, Ken Patera, uh, Jesse Ventura, King Kong Bundy, Randy Savage, Jim Neidhart, like I said earlier, um, the Bass brothers,
Hogan.
yeah, Hogan when he wrestled the first time he wrestled in Memphis, managed by Jimmy Hart. But and that's again before the guys he went through in the WWF before the Hart Foundation. Uh, Jimmy Hart managed every big name heel in Memphis and put Memphis wrestling on the map. Uh, because if a guy couldn't talk like the Mongolian Stopper or oh, or any of the Masked Men or the Dream Machines or any of the tag teams they had back then like the New York Dolls or the Galaxians, it was Jimmy Hart that did all the talking for him.
Yep.
Um, for the Dutch Mantels, for the Buddy Landells, um, it started because of Jimmy. But he made his WWF debut, putting himself on the map and making him a household name on this date, 1985. And once Jimmy Hart debuted in 1980 in the WWF, his life and our lives have never been the same.
Nope.
And Jerry Lawler will say that unlike Paul Heyman, he broke Jimmy Hart's jaw by accident. With Heyman, it was on purpose.
It was on purpose.
Yeah. Now, was it an accident? Was it on purpose? It was on purpose.
It was on purpose.
With Jimmy, when Jerry Lawler legitimately broke his leg, um, when he was a top man in Memphis, uh, Jimmy Hart cut a promo saying that Jimmy Hart was Jerry Lawler's manager at the time when Jerry Lawler broke his leg and he could not wrestle. He was out for a year.
Yeah.
He was a top guy, and your top guy's out for a year. And Jimmy Hart said, "Well, what do you do? Well, you got a racehorse. He can't run anymore. You take him out back and shoot him." And according to Jerry Lawler, Jerry Jarrett, it didn't sit well with Jerry Lawler. So when he got back to Jimmy, when he got the biggest comeback in wrestling at the time, biggest comeback in Memphis, the biggest run of sellouts they had was when Jerry Lawler came back, and we got his hands on Hart. Some say it was a punch went awry. Some say Jerry Lawler was upset with what Jimmy said about him. But either way, Jimmy Hart's jaw was broken by Jerry Lawler, whether whether by accident or it was on purpose. But
Lovely.
Jimmy Hart made his debut today in 1985.
Don't
And
end
that.
No.
Okay.
Don't. I wanted to add something to wrestling stories. Something that just
Go
occurred to
ahead.
me. I forgot to tell you, and I know you'll find this humorous.
Of course.
And I will file this under wrestling historian.
Hmm.
So when I was up in Philly a couple weeks ago, I was talking to my dad about a lot of things. One of the things that came up was wrestling, and one of the things that came up was something that we've talked about at great length, and that was because he brought up Andy Kaufman about something, and that of course
Okay.
segued into Andy Kaufman and the wrestling thing.
Hmm.
And I broke it to this man. I broke it to him
Hmm.
40 years later that was an angle and not real.
Wow.
And the look
You
on
had.
his face, it was like after all this time he understood wrestling. Like, oh. Because look, if for people who are watching on Twitch, and Craig, you look at me, when I said, yeah, no, it was part of a show. It wasn't real. It was wrestling. It wasn't real. And he looked at me. He was like,
Wow.
and he's like, and the words he said to me, and I was very proud for a second. I was like, all right, Dad, they got you. It was like, so wait, he didn't really break his neck? No, part of the show, baby.
No.
He's like, oh, I'm like, yeah. And you can see this. He had this looking realization, like, I get it. I think I get it now. But for all these years, because we talked about the segment they did on Letterman, and how Letterman would never talk about it again or never show it again, and he was the only
Yeah.
one. He was so mad that he wasn't in on it, that he was like really mad at them, and
Mm.
blah 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 blah. Planned, dropped him on his head twice, broke his neck. Blah blah blah. It was a gimmick. It was just him being a heel, and he wanted to be a wrestler, but because he was so small, he's like, I'll just wrestle ladies and I'll get my ass kicked. It was all a gimmick, Dad. She was just like, huh. Just I was very happy for a second. I was like, yes. I just thought you'd get a kick out of that. 40
I,
years later, he's like, huh.
you're the one that told your dad that there's no Santa Claus.
Yeah, yeah, essentially. Well, yeah, because he didn't grow up. He was an adult at the time. Obviously, I was born.
Mm.
What year was that?
1980. It was 82.
Yeah, I was born the next year. So he
Okay.
was in his late 20s. But it was like telling a kid. Hope there's no kids listening. Hey, Santa Claus isn't real. It was like all these years he thought a big tough wrestler beat up some celebrity guy who dared to get in the ring with him, and I was like, no, Dad, it was just like,
Mm.
no, it was just like anything else.
Yeah.
Celebrity it was all they were all in on it. Oh,
Yeah. It was Andy's idea. Uh, to do the whole thing was even getting pile drived and even getting taken out on an ambulance. That
to
was
the
all
point where
his
he
idea.
committed to the neck brace for how long?
Yes, when the match took place in April and it was August and he was still wearing it, even on David Letterman, and even that was his idea.
Uh, I'll never forget the sound that slap made. But anyway, you could end the segment now. I just wanted to throw that in there for you.
That's a great segment. I could talk about Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler for eons, just because it was just a great dynamic, and why that man isn't in the Hall of Fame is beyond me. Because there would be no wrestling celebrities in wrestling without before Cyndi Lauper and who's also not in the Hall of Fame. It started with Andy Kaufman
Yeah.
having a professional wrestler on a late night talk show. Jerry Lawler was the first. Um,
Yeah.
well, Andre, but because of
Yeah,
the
but
match,
Andre was
it
on
was
the
Jerry
show
Lawler.
because he was Andre.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andre actually did the Tonight Show when it was hosted by Joey Bishop.
Oh
That was his
God.
first time on
The
the Tonight Show.
the least
But
talented
he,
member of the Rat Pack. I said it.
yes, yeah, I said it too. I was gonna go with Peter Lawford, but Joey Bishop was yeah, apples and oranges, tomato tomato potato.
Fill one hand with poop and the other with diarrhea, and see which one it sucks more.
Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop.
Eh,
I give Peter Lawford. Joey Bishop's from Philly, so I can't knock him too badly.
whatever.
But that, my friends, it's what's called the wrestling
And
historian.
I think that'll wrap it up for everything. I think we've gone at great length this week. It was a great discussion, a great wrestling historian segment. And I think that'll about do it for all of us. Thanks for everybody for joining us on Twitch, on YouTube, Twitter. We'll go through all those particulars in a second, but this is the last push, sir. You have a show coming up in mere days. Well, when this airs, in a day. So push it now, buddy.
I'm pushing it. I'm gonna push it real good.
Okay.
Uh, tomorrow, wrestling fans, if you're in the Philadelphia area, I'm doing a show. I'm telling you a story about my life and as it pertains to television. Um, it's called My Life in 19 Inches, and it's a story about how television has shaped my life from puberty to adultery, and how much it plays a part in my everyday life and my upbringing. Like Steve Martin, I was born a poor black child, and I went to an all-white private school, and that was the name of it, all-white private school. And I used television to fit into both worlds. So my show tomorrow is what my journey. I go through the 70s, 80s, 90s, right up to today. It's got music videos back when they played them on television.
What?
It's got Saturday morning cartoons. It's got reality TV in the night, everything. So we go through a whole Lawrence of Arabia type journey, and I do it on stage. And I hope you can come out and see it. Uh, Tickets are $15 at the door, but they're only $10 if you get them online. You can go to my Facebook page with all the information. It's called My Life in 19 Inches, and I hope you can check it out. Like I said, my Facebook page. You can also on Twitter, Instagram, and you can follow me there, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Craig Lagons, CraigLaggeons.
Follow me on Twitter at Danlaw83, the HIAC Talk Radio Network. You can see right there on your screen, almost ready through the whole show without a sound from my phone, and I ruined it right at the end.
So close, so close.
So close, but yet so far. HIAC Talk Radio. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or Google Podcast, Android, whatever they call it these days, type in VOC Nation Radio Network. Go to YouTube.com or Twitch.tv. Type in Danlaw83 to find the videos. Or if you want to listen on your web browser, thebradyhicks.com. For Craig Lagons, I am the above average comedian Dan Calachico. We will see you next week. Good night, everybody.